A discussion and action, possible action for approval of amendment to the Board of Supervisors Agreement number 18-074 with Liebert Cassidy Whitmore in the amount of $150,000 for a revised agreement total of $300,000 and extending the termination date to June 30th, 2020 to continue to provide contract negotiations and employee relations services and various legal representation effective when agreement becomes fully executed through June 30th, 2020. Human Resources is the sponsor. Ms. Dunham's here to do the introduction, as well as I see we have a PowerPoint.
Yes, we do. Very brief. Good morning. Heidi Dunham, Human Resources Director. This morning, as you just noted, we're requesting approval to amend the Liebert Cassidy Whitmore labor agreement and increase the total from $150,000 to $300,000 and extend the term of the agreement through June 30th to 2020. Liebert Cassidy Whitmore provides labor relations services to us, and I prepared a brief PowerPoint for you to just go over some of the information related to this contract. So if I can figure out how to do this. Yay. Okay, so here's a brief status on our labor negotiations at the moment. We are currently in negotiations with our general employees through SEIU, and we are also in negotiations with our attorneys, our McPaw group, who's represented by Teamsters. We've received a request for information from the Deputy Sheriff's Association, who are represented by Ms. Dagny, and we have also received a request to set dates from the confidential bargaining unit. All of our labor agreements expire by the end of this year, and we will enter into negotiations with those bargaining units. I did a brief poll of my statewide association of personnel administrators regarding labor representation to see how other counties handle this. We received responses from 38 counties, and of those 38 counties, 8 of them have an internal team or unit who handle all of their labor negotiations. 24 use outside representation for their negotiations, and 6 have a combination of using both outside representation and internal units. And I did just want to note that I did review that list, and size of the county didn't seem to matter. They were all over the board, whether they were small or large. The Mendocino County model for labor negotiations. We have LCW is our lead negotiator when we negotiate with SEIU for our general employees, when we negotiate with deputy sheriffs with Ms. Dagny, when we negotiate with our attorneys and probation department, who are represented by Teamsters, and last year also with our Law Enforcement Management Association. This year, and county HR and internal bargaining team did the bargaining with the confidential department heads and management. This year, we're going to try to do that again. We think we save money doing that, and we only consult with LCW if we need to on those other bargaining units.
Sure. Can I have a question? Can we just go back to that chart?
Sure.
So just, I don't know if people at home can see that chart, but basically where the employee bargaining groups are paying for out-of-county representation, the county of Mendocino, the taxpayers are paying for out-of-county representation. So it's sort of an escalation system where people bring in people from the outside and people from the outside come in to negotiate.
That's correct.
Whereas the groups that are where the employees are representing themselves at the bargaining table, other county employees are representing the taxpayers in that bargaining process.
Correct. We have our, I've prepared a little chart with our historical labor relations contract costs. I went back through fiscal year 13-14 and pulled out the actual expenses related to labor relations. And as you can see, we are trending downward. And I believe that that's because we are trying to handle more internally through HR and with the assistance of county council. Through June 30th, we had a total of $75,000 in expenses. And even though I'm asking asking for $150,000 additional for next year. I'm hoping that we won't spend all of that. That would be the maximum. And I hope to continue to see a downward trend in our labor costs. Some of the advantages of having outside representation: the county has an experienced lead negotiator from the largest firm in California specializing in public sector employment law and labor. Our lead negotiator is familiar with Mendocino County practices, ordinance, civil service rules, and employment practices. Our lead negotiator has established a relationship with the bargaining unit representatives. Lead negotiator has instant access to subject matter experts when needed in order to quickly access information and address matters as needed. Having an experienced labor law attorney at the table puts us on equal footing with bargaining units represented by both Mustagny and Teamsters, as each have an attorney as their lead negotiator at the table with us. And settling differences at the bargaining table with a full understanding of labor laws can avoid impasse, mediation, and arbitration, which can be very costly to the county. And that concludes my presentation. If anybody has questions.
Okay. Board members? All right. Supervisor Haschak.
Yeah, I guess my understanding is that $150,000, part of it is for the labor negotiations, and then part is for issues, employee issues, human resource issues that come up.
That is correct. They also represent us in complicated meet and confer issues. When we have a complicated grievance issue, they represent us and are also available for consultation. If we were to have mediation, they are our representative during mediation or arbitration if we went to that point. Also, in administrative and court proceedings if needed regarding labor issues.
Right. And follow-up question is, with all the contracts, it looks like most of the contracts are up this year.
Yes, they are.
And so wouldn't there be a decreased need for the labor negotiator to be at the table when we don't have contracts being actively negotiated?
That would be the following fiscal year.
That would, okay, so you expect to have a decrease in that?
I'm hoping that that trend continues down and that we will continue to see a decrease. It's a little bit difficult to track because last fiscal year is the first year that we actually separated the contracts and pulled the investigations out of this contract so that we can just really track the labor costs.
And I saw all the benefits for having this LCW come in, and they're from LA, I guess.
San Francisco.
Okay. And so, but what would it take to get in-house negotiators to deal with these bargaining units? Because, you know, from my teaching experience, I saw that, you know, if there were contract negotiators coming from outside, that they didn't have a real interest in making the process go smoothly or quickly. Rather, you know, they got paid, you know, per diem or whatever they were getting paid. And so it kind of drug on the process. It seems like if we had in-house negotiators, it would facilitate more problem solving.
Well, we do have an in-house negotiating team, and that's made up of representatives from HR and the CEO, and Donna Williamson from LCW. I do believe that Donna has our best interests at heart, and I don't believe that she does those things that you talked about. I did look at what the cost would be to bring on a full-time, very experienced labor attorney on staff and a fully loaded deputy county counsel 4 that could specialize in labor would cost the county about $188,000 a year.
And that would be a year's full-time for the year.
Correct.
So, and do you think that that's what we're using at this point with LCW?
No, I don't.
We're not using anywhere near that much.
No.
All right, I'm going to go to public comment. Oh, Supervisor Williams.
So I think HR has diligently carried out previous board direction. I do have some concern about that board direction. I see this, I think we put $5 million in our budget spreadsheet at a past meeting. We don't know if that'll be the final number, but that was a placeholder. This represents about 6% of that. And I see that where bargaining units have outside counsel, it's escalated, and now we have outside counsel to negotiate. I would like to see us de-escalate, and because ultimately we're taking from the available funds that could go to employees. I would rather that $300,000 go to the employees than a negotiation with those same employees. And we know how much we can afford. That's a board decision. The only question is how to equitably divide it. I would rather see us collaborate rather than negotiate.
Okay, we're going to go to public comment. Anyone with public comment, please come forward. Seeing no one, it's back to the board. Supervisors. Supervisor Jurdy.
Well, I would love to see a de-escalation. Unfortunately, there are some people who don't live in Mendocino County who seem to want to escalate everything. And we heard some comments on the last agenda item that were way off mark. The complaint we've heard, and it's totally valid, from most county employees are not paid in a competitive way compared to their counterparts in other counties. And I'm a leader who's actually taken a reduction in pay, acknowledging that, although that's never been acknowledged by SEIU publicly for some strange reason. But the reason for the COF study was to determine is the county of Mendocino underpaying in salary or underpaying in benefits or both? And what the study showed is, in spite of some quibbling, is that the benefits are roughly comparable to the other agencies. They are very close. And they are more out of market on salary. And that the focus of negotiations should be what the employees have told me on the salary, not on yet additional benefits. And so instead of acknowledging the success of the COF study, we hear more whining. And I think until the bargaining groups get negotiators on their behalf who are focusing on accepting wins when they get a win, instead of complaining and turning every victory into a defeat, these negotiations, unfortunately, will last longer than they need to last. They will cost the taxpayers and the employees more than they should cost. And there will be, unfortunately, money wasted that could go to compensation. And it's the choice of the negotiators, and it's the decision of the negotiators that are leading to that outcome.
Supervisor Haschek.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Listening to Supervisor Jurdy, I do think that we share the common goal of trying to get quick settlements and settlements that are not acrimonious and all those kind of things. But I do think that SEIU and Mr. Hickey did bring up some legitimate concerns about the COF study. I think we saw that last time when we saw when it was presented, that there was one of the jobs classifications was 106% below market value, and there was no real explanation for that, and then it went away from what I can see. And so I do think that having sat at the table as a teacher representative on the union side, I think that there is legitimate concern about getting fair representation for everyone. I appreciate what the bargaining units do, and a lot of these people who are working for the county are not negotiators. But when we have people from human resources, those people should be fairly well versed in negotiations, and that's their job. And so that's the need for a person like Mr. Hickey, who lives in Mendocino County, and I don't see that as trying to amp up animosity or anything. I think that he's representing the people, and I appreciate that. I think there are concerns about the COF study, and we need to take those seriously. Thank you.
Ms. Angelo.
Thank you, Chair Brown. I would just like to add a little history here for the past 12 years. When I started in 2007, this county had a contract with EDA, and I think some of you remember that was Fran Buchanan. We have always utilized human resources staff, executive office staff, and an outside negotiator. And there are reasons for that. We have close to 1,200 employees. We have multiple different labor groups. And if we had one or two labor groups, it might be different. What happened at that time is we did an RFP. We terminated our contract with EDA, and if you remember, we had Rick Haig for quite a few years, and he was not an attorney. He was a human resources director who had retired and was doing labor negotiations, and Rick did a great job for us. What happened was we landed up, and I know that three of you know this, we landed up in at an impasse, a major impasse, with our labor groups, and the labor groups, one of them anyway, attempted to file an injunction against the county. So what we landed up doing on a Friday evening at 5 o'clock was hiring Myers Nave to work for us. So what I'm saying to you is that the capacity, if we're just dealing with everyday issues, and I'm not talking about the cough study, we're just talking about labor negotiations, everyday issues, probably not a problem. But when you get to the point where we had major issues, which could happen again, even though that's not what we want, it could happen again. We landed up hiring a law firm, and this was hired out of county council. So what I'm saying to you is county council, human resources, the executive office, there's not the capacity to deal with major labor issues. And when we have all the bargaining groups out with their contracts up, it's possible that that will happen, while we don't want that. So what I'm saying is that when we had to hire a law firm from Sacramento at 5 o'clock on a Friday night to do all weekend to work on our paperwork with us so that on Monday we could go back to court, that was extremely costly. And to do that was not the best practice, and certainly not the best form of government. So it was at that time that a decision was made that when we would go out with an RFP for an additional negotiation firm, that we would look at a law firm. And so we've had LCW for quite a few years. They've served us well. And in fact, Donna Williamson has a really good relationship with DSA and also with SEIU, and we have utilized SEIU representatives to help us with labor management. So when you talk about Patrick Hickey, we had Paul Kaplan, who actually sat and was our facilitator when we first began our labor management team. So everything that has been said by this board, I think is certainly accurate, and certainly the direction we want to go in. It benefits the organization, the employees, all of us, when we can go in, do a very quick negotiation and get the job done. Unfortunately, that's not always the reality. But I will never forget a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock working with our chief counsel, hiring a law firm from Sacramento to work with us all weekend long to get everything done for court when an injunction was filed. We don't ever want to get there again, but we want to be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor McCowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think a lot of good points have been made on all sides. One slight correction, though, we're not talking about 300,000. We're talking about 150,000 is the item before us today. And it's correct that the board has set as a placeholder $5 million of general fund for employee negotiations. That probably translates more into 8 or 9 million total when it's spread across all the bargaining groups and factoring in that percentage of pay that is non-general fund. I think a lot of the points raised in the cost study need to be reviewed. We need to know the factual basis of those. I do agree with that. But I also appreciate the reason stated for the advantages of hiring someone to assist with employee negotiations. And, I believe that I'm the only supervisor who has pulled from the consent calendar the contracts for non-labor negotiations with LCW. I think the county spends a lot of money on legal services that potentially we could have better options for the money we spend there. I think it winds up being a significantly greater amount than what we spend here on labor. So although this current fiscal year, 150,000 budgeted, year-to-date through 4/30, about half of that, it's true we weren't fully ramped up for employee negotiations, but now we are going into negotiations. We're either in or going into negotiations with every one of our bargaining groups. I would like to say that Donna Williamson is, in my experience, the ideal person for the job. She's not someone that's going to try and drag things out or stir things up. She is very knowledgeable on labor law, and I think she has the right demeanor to represent us at the table in partnership with our county staff. And so here we are either in or will be in negotiations. I hardly think this is the time to abandon the negotiator that we've had for several years and cast about trying to bring in somebody new or ramp up the capacity in-house to do so. I think that would be more likely to drag out the process and ultimately cost more money and create more discord.
Supervisor Haschek?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I've heard the same thing about Ms. Williamson, and I appreciate the efforts and where we are, and certainly we're in the middle of negotiations, or we don't want to change horses in the middle of that stream, but I think in the long term, we should look at bringing it back home to Mendocino County and having our own people deal with these negotiations as much as possible.
Supervisor McCowan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move the recommended action.
Okay, we have a motion for the recommended action,
Second.
and we have a second by Supervisor Haschek. Any other comment? Seeing none, we'll vote by the button.
Motion carries with Supervisor Williams dissenting.
Thank you.